Again. Okay, we're on chapter 4 for our book on tyranny. And before we get started, I wanted to mention real quick, these are red cards, and it's probably going to be backwards. So you go to redcardorders.com if you wanted to get one of these. And basically, these are cards that you can get for people who may not have, good papers or whatever ICE is looking for. So anyways, it's one side is Spanish, one side is English. And it basically is like communicates that they are asserting their rights. So, like one says, I choose to exercise my constitutional rights. I do not give you permission to search any of my belongings based on my Fourth Amendment rights, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are in contact with people who may be in that position, it's good to just have some of these cards on you to just spread them out. Be a good person. Okay. Chapter 4 on tyranny. Take responsibility for the face of the world. The symbols of today enable the reality of tomorrow. Notice the swastikas and the other signs of hate. Do not look away and do not get used to them. Remove them yourself and set an example for others to do so. Life is political, not because the world cares about how you feel, but because the world reacts to what you do. The minor choices we make are themselves the kind of vote, making it more or less likely that free and fair elections will be held in the future. In the politics of the everyday, our words and gestures or their absence count very much. A few extreme and less extreme examples of the 20th century can show us how. In the Soviet Union, under the rule of Joseph Stalin, prosperous farmers were portrayed on propaganda posters as pigs, a dehumanization that in a rural setting clearly suggests slaughter. This was in the early 1930s as the Soviet state tried to master the countryside and extract capital for crash industrialization. The peasants who had more land or livestock than others were the first to lose what they had. A neighbor portrayed as a pig is someone whose land you can take. But those who followed the symbolic logic became victims in their turn. Having turned the poorer peasants against the richer, Soviet power then seized everyone's land for the new collective farms. Collectivization, when completed, brought starvation to much of the Soviet peasantry. Millions of people in Soviet Ukraine, Soviet Kazakhstan, and Soviet Russia died horrible and humiliating deaths between 1930 and 1933. Before it was over, Soviet citizens were butchering corpses for human meat. In 1933, as the starvation in the USSR reached its height, the Nazi Party came to power in Germany. In the euphoria of victory, Nazis tried to organize a boycott of Jewish shops. This was not very successful at first, but the practice of marking one firm as Jewish and another as Aryan with paint on the windows or walls did affect the way Germans thought about household economics. A shop marked Jewish had no future. It became an object of covetous plans. As property was marked as ethnic, envy transformed ethics. If shops could be Jewish, what about other companies and properties? The wish that Jews might disappear, perhaps suppressed at first, rose as it was leavened by greed. Thus the Germans, who marked shops as Jewish, participated in the process by which Jews really did disappear, as did people who simply looked on. Accepting the markings as a natural part of the urban landscape was already a compromise with a murderous future. You might one day be offered the opportunity to display symbols of loyalty, Make sure that such symbols include your fellow citizens rather than exclude them. Even the history of lapel pins is far from innocent. In Nazi Germany in 1933, people wore lapel pins that said yes during the elections and referendum that confirmed the one-party state. In Austria in 1938, people who had not previously been Nazis began to wear swastika pins. What might seem like a gesture of pride can be a source of exclusion. In the Europe of the 1930s and 40s, some people chose to wear swastikas, and then others had to wear yellow stars. The late history of communism, when no one believed in the revolution anymore, offers a final lesson about symbols. Even when citizens are demoralized and wish only to be left alone, public markers can still sustain a tyrannical regime. When Czechoslovak communists won election in 1946 and then proceeded to claim full power after a coup in 1948, many Czechoslovak citizens were euphoric. When the dissident thinker Václav Havel wrote The Power of the Powerless 3 decades later in 1978, he was explaining the continuity of an oppressive regime in whose goals and ideology few people still believed. He offered a parable of a greengrocer who places a sign reading, "Workers of the world unite," in his shop window. It is not that the man actually endorses the content of this quotation from the Communist Manifesto. He places the sign in his window so that he can withdraw into daily life without trouble from the authorities. When everyone else follows the same logic, the public sphere is covered with signs of loyalty and resistance becomes unthinkable. As Havel put it, we have seen that the real meaning of the greengrocer slogan was nothing to do with what the text of the slogan actually says. Even so, the real meaning is quite clear and generally comprehensible because the code is so familiar. The greengrocer declares his loyalty in the only way the regime is capable of hearing. That is by accepting the prescribed ritual, by accepting appearances as reality, by accepting the given rules of the game, thus making it possible for the game to go on, for it to exist in the first place. And what happens, asked Havel, if no one plays the game? Okay, that's the end of that chapter. So, something to think about. Take responsibility for the face of the world. So if you see, I guess right now the swastikas are the MAGAs, right? Or the MAGA, flags and signs and the hats. So, anyways, it's time to ask ourselves, would we put the sign in the window? Would I? No, not without some vandalism first. I feel like that would create the illusion of safety, right? Which was the reason the dude did it. And that's not something I'm interested in. I want the real thing for me and for mine and for all of yours. And most of your mine. So. Oh, and also, I'm willing to fight for that. As most of you know, I'm willing to fight in the street for your kids. Not that I've done that before, but I totally would. Okay, love you, bye.